We're talking ballers, so let me hear you holler in those comments. Welcome to the Hoops Variety Hour with your hosts, Jacob and
Cole.
Alright, now today we've got a number of topics we'd like to discuss, and our first topic on the docket is the potential playoff bracket. Now, I think first we need to discuss the whole situation that's going on right now, because who knows if the playoffs will even happen?
So, yeah. Before talking about the potential standings, brackets, all that sort of fun stuff that we're about to get into, we are coming at this with the assumption that the season will resume, even though it is looking more and more unlikely as the days go by. But we hold out hope that we can...
Of course.
We hold out hope. That being said, lots of interesting things happen, like the Sixers get healthy, the Nets maybe get Kevin Durant back, all sorts of fun stuff. If the Warriors were in the playoffs, which they're not, we might even get Clay back. So it would have been really interesting.
If you can't tell, this guy's a Warriors homer, so
Yeah.
we don't need any of his takes on the Warriors.
I only managed to put 2 into my all-time starting 5. 2 Warriors.
All right. So, the first matchup we have in the Eastern Conference is the number 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks versus the 8 seed Orlando Magic. In this series,
Jacob,
I think...
Jacob, you forgot. We're not just discussing the playoff picture. We're discussing the X factors and the Y factors. Actually, I like that better. These aren't X factors. These are role players. They're the Y factors. These are the guys that are going to make the low-key difference. And we want to shout some out. So, sorry. That's important because it's like the Bucks sweep the Magic.
Easily.
It is what it is. And yet, I think there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about in terms of the Magic getting playoff experience.
Like?
Well, for instance, they have this guy called Markelle Fultz that everyone thought was a bust, and it turns out Mans was not a bust. So, here's what I think. I think the Magic have they should compartmentalize goals that are not winning the series, because we know that they are not going
We
to
know that
win
they're
the
going to get
series.
steamrolled by Giannis Antetokounmpo.
If the Magic beat the 1-seeded Bucks, that might be the biggest playoff upset in NBA history.
Even said by a Warriors fan.
Well, I mean, listen. Who did we beat? Was Dirk the MVP that year? I don't think he was. No, was he?
I'm not sure.
Here's the thing. Even if Dirk was the MVP, which I will fact check in a little bit, Giannis is the 2-time MVP. And I don't want to hear this, the MVP hasn't been decided yet. Giannis is the 2-time MVP. So if somehow the Markelle Fultz, Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac less Orlando Magic can do it, that seems like a more ridiculous upset to me.
Well, I think speaking that the Milwaukee Bucks have the best record in the NBA, this would be quite the upset, and I don't think there's a chance in hell it's going to happen.
No, but it's still fun
Steamrolled
to
by
talk
Giannis.
about. Who do you think is the X factor on the Bucks?
I don't think it matters. I think Giannis is going to just destroy them. But to be honest, one player that I'm really excited to watch in the playoffs is Brook Lopez. I think Brook Lopez has had a very surprising season on the Bucks. He's been one of their better players, and I think he fits that team really well. And I like to see Brook Lopez succeeding on a basketball team because he spent so long on the Nets, wallowing in misery as they lost every game.
Sucking dick. No, I think that's a good point. I think Brook Lopez often gets disrespected for how good of a defensive player he is. He is one of the reasons that the Bucks are so hard to score on, because I mean, I can look it up, but he's averaging something like 3 blocks a game this season. Something
I think that's a
crazy
little high.
like that. No, something crazy like that, I swear.
All I know is Brook Lopez is large and in charge in the paint and can also shoot the ball very well for a center.
I mean, yeah, no, they call him the Splash Mountain for a reason. I don't think he's the X factor, but you know.
Who would be your X factor then?
Well, it's Eric Bledsoe, obviously. Eric Bledsoe. Here's the thing. Eric Bledsoe needs to play like an all-star in the playoffs, right? Because he has great games in the regular season. He is a part of an incredibly good team, and everyone plays their role very well, except when Eric Bledsoe gets to the playoffs, traditionally, he lays an egg. He doesn't lay an egg. An egg has lots of protein and is very good for you. He lays like... He lays a... What does he lay?
A big ol' 0.
He lays a fucking...
A game that's not good.
Yeah. He lays a baseball.
Sure. Well, I think this is a good segue to our next matchup. The 2-seeded Toronto Raptors versus the 7-seeded Brooklyn Nets. And the player I think in this series that is going to make a massive difference is Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry, although he had a very good playoffs last year, has been known to lay an egg in the playoffs.
Except,
and I think this playoff will be... The playoff run of the Raptors this year will be very decided by how Kyle Lowry plays. We all know Pascal is going to play well. We know what the other Raptors are going to do. But Kyle Lowry is just very inconsistent in the playoffs from what I've seen. And
here's what I'll give you.
He's good.
Here's what I'll give you. Kyle Lowry has only truly been great in the playoffs with Kawhi Leonard. Now, he is having a great season. He was an all-star. He is spearheading the emotional leadership of this Toronto team that has come out and surprised everyone. This Toronto season, by the way, which I think is totally underrated and people are completely disrespecting them. But what I can see is that when Kyle Lowry has been one of the 2 best players on your team in the playoffs, because last season he was the 3rd best player behind Siakam. I don't care what anyone says. Siakam was a menace in the playoffs last year. When he's a top 2 player on your team, he has not stepped up the way he needs to. In the past, when he has been the top 2 player on these incredible regular season Raptors teams, they have underperformed over and over and over again. So I can see where the concern comes from, but I think here's the difference.
LeBron is not in the East.
LeBron is not in the East. Pascal Siakam has emerged. He is now, probably say top 10 player in the league, right?
I think that might be a bit of a stretch, but he's definitely up there.
Think about it, though. He's the best player on the 2 seed in the East. You got to give him some credit for that.
Of course, I do give him credit, but there's a lot of other good basketball players in the NBA.
There's a lot of good basketball players in the NBA and on the Raptors, but all the Raptors players were injured this season. They got carried by Nick Nurse. But they got carried by Pascal Siakam, too.
I 100% agree that Pascal Siakam is a very good basketball player. Is he top 10 in the league? I think that might be a bit of a stretch right now, but I could see him there very soon.
After all, he isn't averaging 2.4 blocks like Brook Lopez.
And there's the stat, folks. You heard it here. Well, the only thing I think we need to discuss about Brooklyn is really the factor of Kevin Durant possibly coming back for the series, because without him, I don't think they stand a chance. But if Kevin Durant were to come back, I think that would make for quite the interesting series. And who knows, maybe the Nets could come up with an upset.
Here's the thing. If Kevin Durant plays in this series, I can see it going 6 games. But coming off the Achilles injury, never playing with his teammates, on this Brooklyn Nets team that is not even 500, against the Toronto Raptors team that is 46-18 when the season ended, even with Kevin Durant coming back, I just don't see it. I feel like it'll be a lot like when Jordan came back towards the end of the season after his first retirement. And they're good, and he made his team a lot better. He's probably going to ball out. I can see Kevin Durant averaging 30 in the playoff series. But I think they're just going to get outcoached. The Toronto Raptors are deeper. They have more veterans. They have more experience. I just don't see it, even with Kevin Durant coming back. No, without Kyrie.
I agree with that. I do think it'll be a much more interesting series.
I think 5. Yeah, I'll give Durant 2 games. It's a sweep without Durant. It's a 6-game series with Durant.
I'd say that's a fair assessment. All right. on to our next matchup in the East. The 3-seeded Boston Celtics versus the 6-seeded Philadelphia 76ers. Arguably one of the most interesting series in the playoffs in the first round.
For sure. It is the most interesting Eastern Conference first round playoff. For sure. This is not a first round matchup that anyone expected, I think, before the season started.
I don't think so either. These two teams are very, very good. They have star-studded starting lineups, and I mean the Celtics have some serious depth. The Sixers maybe lacking a bit there.
Do the Celtics have depth though?
I think they have some pretty decent depth.
Oh no, dude. The Celtics guard depth is kind of booty. Like who do they got coming off for point shooting guard? Carson Edwards?
They have a Wanamaker, right?
Oh, my mistake. The Celtics are set up, dude. Huge
Granted,
depth.
They don't have the best guard depth. They do have some decent players off the bench, but also, let's be honest, that doesn't matter when you have Kemba, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart playing in your starting lineup.
And that's really what it comes down to, right? Is honestly, I look at the Eastern Conference and I think just pure offensive talent, ability to score from every area, and diversity and player skill sets. I feel like Boston just has the best offense. And this is without looking at, offensive win shares or points per game. I haven't looked at any of that. But just like on paper, I see like for the playoffs, and these are proven playoff Boston players that have been with the team for years. I just see their offense being so much more potent than these other teams. Even with Giannis on the Milwaukee Bucks, like they're gonna have obviously an amazing offense, but I think they're going to really win their games in the playoffs with their defense. Brook Lopez gonna be
serious
blocking
factor.
shots.
Giannis as well.
No, Giannis is a bum on defense.
No, I agree that this is a very interesting series. I personally am going to give Boston the edge. I think Philadelphia will make it interesting. I would not count out Joel Embiid to have one or two insane games.
That's the thing.
Especially speaking that the Celtics do not exactly have the best defensive centers. I think Joel is going to be a hard stop for them.
I feel like the X factor in this series is definitely Joel Embiid because he is the best player in the series, which is very important in the playoffs, right? The team with the best player, and provided they have the right pieces around that player, which you could argue that they don't in Philadelphia, but normally a playoff team that has aspirations, that has the best player, tends to win that playoff series.
That is very true.
But there's two things here. One, Boston just has... I just keep thinking about that starting lineup, and I'm like, Boston is nutty. But two, Jason Tatum is young, and I feel like the playoffs are where the young, good players sort of make their mark, make their leap. This is a hot take. I don't think this will actually happen. But Jason Tatum could emerge as the best player in that series, If they're really
easily.
outplaying the Sixers...
Definitely.
It's going to be really bad for... If the Sixers lose in the first round, they got to trade someone, right?
Oh, I
They're
definitely
healthy.
think so. Honestly, I really think the Sixers should maintain the core of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. That's just a tandem that's incredibly hard to deal with. But, Tobias and Horford, I don't know if the pieces that they want around those two. I think they definitely need to get some more floor spacers on that team because, let's be honest, as good of a player as Ben Simmons is, his shooting is atrocious.
Well,
We cannot drain a three to save his life.
we don't even know if his shooting is atrocious. How would we know?
Why do you think he doesn't shoot? It's terrible.
The only shot he takes... He took one 3-point shot in the NBA this year. He made it.
There's a reason he's not shooting three-pointers. He's not good at it.
I don't know,
He's
dude.
not even that great from the mid-range.
His
He's
teammates
okay.
tell him to shoot the threes. His coach told him to shoot the threes. It's like... I feel like it's mental with him. He just... I don't know. It's really weird. I've never seen something like it before.
I just don't think it's in his game, and I don't think he's going to develop that three-point shot like other players might be able to. I just think what they need to do is put floor spacers on the team. maybe like a Seth Curry or someone like that. That's a player that could really help this team out by spacing the floor. You know, they need
Maybe
somebody
like
to
a
knock
JJ
down
Redick?
shots. Too bad they don't have him anymore. I mean, Josh Richardson, he's an okay shooter. You know, he's not great or anything like that.
Had a down year this year, but
That's true.
for sure.
But I just really think they need more shooting on that team. Horford's a decent shooter, but that contract is a little more than I think they want to pay right now for a player that's aging.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the Sixers are just so deep into that cap, and their team is so underwhelming.
It's very
You know,
true.
it's just like, at some point, you trusted the process. You got some really great players. You didn't keep all of your great players. You didn't make all the right picks either, but you have the two cornerstones. You got to build around those guys. I don't understand why they signed Horford. Or I do. Apparently it was to beat the Bucks, but like, they're not gonna make it there. Spoiler: I think Boston will win this series too. I guess we should just get to what we think is gonna happen, right? I think it'll be 7 games, because I just think that the Sixers are so talented.
I think Boston in 6, but I think 7 game could definitely happen too.
I think it'll be Boston, and then they'll win at home in Game 7.
I could definitely see that. All right. Well, since we both agree that
we know what the X factor is, but what is the Y factor?
the Y factor in this series.
Who needs to step up on the Sixers in order for them to win? I already have my answer. It's Shake. He needs to be 40% from 3 plus.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
needs to explode.
like I said, they need that shooter, and if Shake can be that shooter, then they might have a chance. But if not, I don't think there's a chance.
By the way,
I
in
really
case
don't.
in case anyone is wondering if we're talking about the other Shakes in the NBA, we're talking about Shake Milton.
Of course.
All right, on to the next one. The final first round of the Eastern Conference, Miami Heat versus Indiana Pacers. This is the second most interesting
In the East, of course.
in the East. Well, honestly, okay. The Celtics Sixers kind of by default are the most interesting first round matchup, just because it's such an unexpected first round matchup, and that is already like a rivalry that has been brewing the past couple of years in the playoffs, and feeding into a much larger rivalry in the Eastern Conference. But this is personally the one that I'm the most excited for, just because I love both of these teams so much. I just think they're both really fun to watch and have really
I
interesting
100% agree with
identities and
that.
players. And I honestly think this is a lot closer than people would give it credit for, especially with all the extra time that we're getting in the before the playoffs. I think that Victor Oladipo could make, much bigger strides, you know?
Oh, Victor Oladipo could be a serious threat in this series. He's just a great all-around basketball player. He can defend, he can shoot, he can take it to the hole, he can dunk it. He can do a lot of things. And, you know, it's a shame that he's been injured for the Pacers this season, because the Pacers have shown that with Sabonis and Warren, they've kind of just been playing really well.
Don't forget
I mean, they have others, of course. They have Malcolm Brogdon. They have
Malcolm Brogdon, yeah.
Miles Turner. And, you know, that team has just come together. They're very well-rounded. They can do a lot. You know, all the players are multifaceted. They have talent in different departments. And Victor Oladipo just makes them even stronger.
I feel like the Pacers and the Heat are just both examples of how you can have good players and you can have them try to do. You know, this is sort of the problem with the Sixers. I think is that they have good players, like great players, amazing players. The Sixers have better players than the Pacers or the Heat, and yet you put them in a system, the Pacers and the Heat, and you put them in that system, give these great players roles to really accentuate their strengths, and then they become all-stars. You get Sabonis becoming an all-star. You get Bam becoming an all-star once he's now given this like clear role and he's, you know, developed on the scene and he's doing all these great things for the Heat now. Whereas with the Sixers, they just basically said, well, you guys are great, so be great on the court, and it just doesn't work like that. I mean, it does. It's obviously just being unbelievably talented will get you to the 6th seed in the East, but we can talk about how impressive that actually is, because the East is
Not as strong as the West.
honestly,
We'll leave it at that.
honestly, I think we should talk about whether or not the Sixers would have made it in the Western Conference, because I think it's arguable
big
that they
question
might
mark.
not have.
Yes, I agree with that. Well,
in the playoffs.
Is Victor Oladipo your X factor for this series then?
I feel like he's got to be the X factor, but I'm not. I feel like he's the obvious X factor, but I'm not interested in the X factor, Jacob. I'm interested in the Y factor.
Whoa, who would be your Y factor then?
Who's the role player that's going to make the difference in this series? And that person is going to be Tyler Hero. Duncan Robinson, I think he's going to be steady. I don't think he'll shoot quite as well as he has from the regular season, just because nobody does. But I think he'll be steady. He's older. He's got that experience. Or not experience in the playoffs, obviously, but he just has more experience as a man. But Tyler Hero, I think, is going to be one of those rookies who comes into the playoffs and overperforms. He's the guy who wants to see the bright lights. He wants to be in the moment. He wants to take the shot. And I think he's going to make it. I think Tyler Hero is really good. I think he's one of the reasons the Miami Heat has been so good this year. He's one of those players that really stepped into his role and really blossomed under the system. And I think that he could be a huge difference maker for the Miami Heat.
Yes, I definitely think Tyler Hero is, one, a phenomenal shooter, two, just a phenomenal scorer. And, I expect him to light up the court. I guess, for me, I wouldn't really say this is a Y factor, but I think the player that's going to make the biggest difference in this series is Malcolm Brogdon. I think the Miami Heat don't have an answer for Malcolm Brogdon on the offensive end, and I think his size, shooting,
You don't think they have an
and
answer
scoring
for him?
ability, I do not. Who do you think is going to cover Malcolm Brogdon on the Heat?
Jimmy Buckets?
I don't think Jimmy Buckets will. I think he'll have to cover Oladipo or TJ Warren. Just plainly because of the size factor.
Actually, you're right. He might cover...
I think he'll cover Oladipo.
Well, you know about the beef, right? Between...
A little bit.
There's the last time they met in the regular season, TJ Warren and Jimmy Butler had a bit of an altercation towards the end of the game. So I think just because of that, we're going to see a lot of Jimmy on Warren and vice versa. But I think when push comes to shove, and if stupid Malcolm Brogdon starts cooking the Heat, they're going to be like, Jimmy, fucking get on that boy.
I mean, that's the thing, though.
You put Sabonis on Warren.
If you put Jimmy Butler on Malcolm Brogdon, you just have Warren and Oladipo who are uncovered. You're going to have Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, or someone else cover those players. I just don't think they have it on the defensive side of the ball. I think the Pacers are a more well-rounded team. Granted, I think the Heat have the two better players between Bam and Jimmy Butler. But I really just think the well-rounded unit of the Pacers takes this series in 7.
I also think it'll go 7 games. But I think it's going to be the Heat. I think Jimmy Butler is the best player in the series. And I think Jimmy Butler... Called shot. Jimmy Butler will hit the game-winning Game 7 shot.
That's a bold claim.
I don't know. I just think that Jimmy Butler is going to somehow will the Heat past. I think that the defensive problems that Brogdon present aren't going to be as big of a deal as you say, just because I think they run such a team-oriented offense. I don't think he's the sort of guy who's going to go and get his own bucket like that. And really just start getting buckets and buckets in a row. Like, he can get hot from the field for sure, but if he's the kind of player who wants to play in the right way. He wants to play through the flow of the game. So I think that those concerns might be a little overblown in my estimation.
I guess we shall see. But I just think the
7.
tandem of Brogdon and Oladipo in the backcourt is just...
It's nasty.
It's tough to deal with.
It really,
when you have
really,
two scorers like that, it's tough to deal with.
Really, it depends on how well Oladipo is able to play. Because he was very inconsistent coming back to the regular season.
It's true. But he has had some time, so who knows?
I have another Y factor, though. On the Pacers this time. Miles Turner.
Go on.
No, that's it. No, I mean, listen. Miles Turner and Sabonis, it's the elephant in the room for the Pacers. Do they fit together on the court? And I think that this playoff series, they have to find that answer, is if they can coexist on the court. And if they can't, I think Miles Turner's out of there.
You know, I would have to agree with that. I'm not sure if it's the right fit, and I clearly think Sabonis is their guy, and it's really just, does Miles Turner play well enough alongside Sabonis to warrant him being there? Or is it, they need to replace Miles Turner with someone who fits alongside Sabonis? But I do think that this is a great series to showcase how well they play alongside each other, because more than likely, Bam is going to be guarding Sabonis just because he's the better player. And that really just leaves the window for Miles Turner to, play against someone who's maybe not an elite defender and someone who he can take advantage of on the offensive end. And they're really going to need to call his number late in games to take advantage of that defensive lapse or liability. And
he has to hit threes.
It's just got to happen.
Thing, too, is I think Miles Turner actually matches up really well against Bam. I feel like that's a favorable matchup for him. That's like exactly the sort of player he wants to defend.
Yep. I definitely think Miles Turner will be interesting in that series. Well, I think that about rounds off the first round in the East. So I say we move to the West.
Slide on over.
And in the West...
Lakers in 4. We don't have to talk about it. Jaw's great. There's no Y factor.
It's true. Jaw's great, but the Lakers are just too good.
Maybe Jaw steals a game. I could see it. But...
I just don't think the Grizzlies are ready yet. They have a good young core.
This will be fun to watch.
They're fun to talk about. They're fun to project for the future of how good this team is going to get. Because they just have so many good young talented players, but they're just not there. LeBron and AD they're just too much.
Now might be a good time to ask whether or not the Sixers would have made the playoffs over the Memphis Grizzlies in the West.
I think that's really hard.
They're 7 games up on them.
That's really just hard to determine. I mean, there's so many good teams in both conferences. But the one thing that I think is really just answers this question is the fact that the Trailblazers even missed out on the playoffs in the West.
Right?
The Trailblazers are an incredible team. They're really good.
And people will say, like, oh, well, the Trailblazers were injured. If the Trailblazers were healthy, they would have definitely made the playoffs. And it's like, well, the Sixers were injured this year. Perpetually.
I think the Sixers have a very similar problem to the Trailblazers of, they have a lot of really good players on their basketball team, but does the system fit with everyone?
No.
Continuing on, we'd like to talk about the next matchup, the 2-seeded Los Angeles Clippers versus the 7th-seeded Dallas Mavericks.
And yeah, this one is a little more fun to talk about than the last one, in my opinion, because you have I would say it was like a top 5 MVP vote or candidate, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Luka Doncic.
One of the best players in the NBA right now.
Lighting up the NBA. Ridiculous season, putting up stupid numbers. Like no player his age that I think I've ever seen that I've been watching basketball. And he's got KP, who is the X factor. KP was also playing very, very, very inspired basketball towards the end of the season. Of course, he did kind of come back down to earth from his he had a really, really good month where he was just like, it looked like the Dallas Mavericks could win the championship. Honestly, when they were both playing like that, it was like, damn. And they got that team. They got your boy Seth, who is a
great role player.
A great role player. And is, in fact, the Y factor.
Well, although I think the Mavericks are a really, really solid young team, they have one of the top rising stars in the league, probably the top rising star in the league in Luka. And they have, Porzingis, who's just a towering 7'3" monster who can shoot the ball like no other 7'3" player can. I think this duo just isn't enough. The Clippers, they have PG and Kawhi. That's such a good duo. They have a great perimeter defense. They have Kawhi Leonard,
I have a question.
who won the playoffs last year.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I get it. Kawhi won the playoffs. Clippers are amazing. They're coasting through the regular season, way deeper than the Mavericks. I get it all. Who's better? Luka or Paul George?
I think, based on this season, I would give the slight edge to Luka Doncic.
All right. And I'm not even going to bother asking because we all know Kawhi is the best player in the series, right?
by a good margin, I think.
Yeah. Who's better between KP and Paul George?
I think I'd give the slight edge to Paul George.
Okay. So. Okay. That's fine. I was just wondering.
Okay. Well, I think this will actually bring me to my Y factor for the series.
You have a
And
Y factor?
I do have a
That's
Y factor
crazy.
for this series, actually. I think a player that might emerge, or not really emerge, but I think someone who is kind of not really talked about that might play really well in this playoffs is Reggie Jackson.
Reggie Jackson. All right.
I think he can play very well off the ball on the court with Kawhi and
You
Paul
do?
George. Oh, yes.
Based on what?
I mean, I just think he's a very good fit with those two. He's just gonna fill in and do things like score when they're like not wanting to. I mean, there's Lou Will too, who's also an elite scoring player. They just have a lot of scoring off the bench, and I mean, I just don't think the Mavs have enough to overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the trade deadline additions that the Clippers made. They got Reggie Jackson, and they got Marcus Morris Sr., who are both just good scorers. I guess what you would say is like if you were gonna buy a can of Marcus Morris and a can of Reggie Jackson, it would say, oh, can shoot, can score, can play defense, right? For Reggie Jackson, it might say can make a pass. Although, like, I've watched the Pistons before. It's not what it says on the can. You open up the can and it's like cat food. That's the analogy that I'm trying to put up for these guys. Like, they get numbers when they're able to dominate the ball, is basically what I'm trying to get at. In this system, in this offense, where they barely had time to acclimate before the season was canceled, I think it's going to create too much friction. I think it's going to create a lot of tension between the best players, because I think there's going to be a lot of disagreements on who should be shooting when. I think Reggie Jackson will not be good in the playoffs. I have bold prediction. I think Reggie Jackson will be out of the NBA within 3 years.
I don't know about that one. Very bold.
It's very bold. That might be too bold. But I really think Reggie Jackson is just sort of at the end of his rope here. I personally think that they should have kept IT instead of Reggie Jackson as their backup point guard.
Personally, as a UW fan as well, I would like to see IT in the league succeeding. It's just too good.
The only reason that I'm, saying all these things about the Clippers, talking about all the weak points that I think they have, is not because I think they're going to lose to the Mavericks. They're going to win in 6 games at the most. 5 games, probably. But keep all those things I said in mind when we move on to the second round.
All right. Well, my prediction, Clips in 6.
And now we have... All right.
This is personally what I think the most interesting matchup in the first round of the playoffs. Definitely the West. The 3-seeded Denver Nuggets versus the 6-seeded Houston Rockets.
Ridiculous. Separated by 3 games, by the way. The Western Conference is ridiculous.
This is just honestly it's going to be a really good series. I mean, I personally don't agree with what the Rockets did with their trade. They left themselves without a center, and I mean, I get it, they're trying to play small ball and shoot it well, but...
And I mean, they get put to the fire right away in the playoffs,
Yeah, what are you going to do against Jokic? Who's going to guard him? Tyson Chandler? I don't see that going so well.
That being said, who is Jokic going to guard? Like, it goes the other way, too,
That's true, but I think he'll be good enough against PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker's not exactly an elite scorer.
Here's the thing. I don't think he even guards PJ Tucker. I think he sags off to the paint, waits for James to drive, and then tries to be a shot blocker.
Yeah, more than likely.
But I think when that happens, you just pass PJ Tucker, and then PJ Tucker gets open all series.
Sounds like PJ Tucker might be your Y factor.
Well, it's funny you're saying that. I have 2 Y factors. PJ Tucker is obviously one, because he is going to be open if Jokic is truly guarding him, which I don't know what the Nuggets could do a lot of things on defense, because they also have Millsap. They also have Jeremy Grant. They have a bunch of really good athletic defenders. Nuggets are. Honestly, can we talk more about Mike Malone? Mike Malone had the best top 5 offense in the league and a bottom 5 defense in the league. And then he said, "All right, guys, the offense is really great. Let's have a top 15 offense. That's fine. But let's have a top 5 defense." And then he just did that with the same player. There's barely anyone changed. They got Jeremy Grant, but that was after they were already really good on defense. I think it's incredible what he has done with the development of these players, especially Gary Harris, who is my other Y factor. Now, yeah, of course. Gary Harris has not just had a down year. He's had a down couple of years. He has plummeted in terms of field goal percentage, in terms of offensive ability. He is becoming a liability on offense a lot of the time, which is sad. Although I still think he's a little underrated because he is a very good he's a very good finisher, and he's a very good fast break player. Which is important because Gary Harris is probably their best perimeter defense on the whole team. Or perimeter defender on the whole team.
Maybe. I don't know.
So I think what it's going to really come down to is how well can Gary Harris shoot. I think that's really going to make or break a lot of moments in this series for me.
Personally, I just think this is going to be an incredibly offensive series, and I think it's just going to be a shootout in almost every game. I think it's going to come down to Jokic is going to score the ball, and they don't really have an answer for that. And I don't really think the Nuggets have a great answer for James Harden.
Also, let's not forget that Jeremy Grant is 24 years old and has gotten better every single year and shot 40% from 3 this year. Let's just not forget that. Because I feel like Jeremy Grant is going to, play really well this playoffs, and then everyone's going to be like, wow, Jeremy Grant really showing out. And it's going to be like, were you watching? I don't know.
I can definitely see that.
Jeremy Grant.
The one thing I think is really interesting with that.
This Nuggets team is
the Nuggets team is really good, but the one thing that I think is really interesting about Jeremy Grant is, as well as he's played this season, I really think that opens up options for the Nuggets. Because, Paul Millsap has a pretty large contract, and if Jeremy Grant can fill in the role that Paul Millsap's playing, and they can free up that cap space to maybe go get someone else, that really just gives them serious roster flexibility to maybe, Paul Millsap wants too much money this offseason. We're gonna let him go and just step Jeremy Grant up into that starting role and let him take over the job, and then say, let's go spend this money somewhere else and get someone else that fits our perimeter defense a little better. Just gives them options.
Yeah, man. You gotta think too, who they got coming off the bench. They got Jeremy Grant, and sometimes he even starts too. Sometimes they'll, they switch it up a lot. But in terms of so we assume Will Barton is starting, right, at small forward.
Probably, I would think so.
And then Millsap, and then Jokic.
I would think so, yeah.
So you got Jeremy Grant coming off the bench. You got Michael Porter Jr. coming off the bench. You got Mason Plumlee coming off the bench.
You got Monte Morris coming off the bench.
Who is, by the way, you do have Monte. That's a 9-man lineup that is, and they could go deeper if they wanted to, but I think they want to stick at 9 and then just feed the minutes to Jokic and Jamal Murray. Which, by the way, Jamal Murray, I think will. I think he's going to be good. I don't think he's going to make it or break it for them. I think people are putting a lot of pressure on Jamal Murray because he got so much money. But I think that the team is so good, and he's in a role that he's comfortable with, and he's going to be good, but he's not going to be as good as people need him to be. And they're going to flame him. They're going to say he's bad, when really the Nuggets are winning this game, or this series, in 7.
I would agree. I think the Nuggets are taking this one. Their inside presence is just, I think, going to prove to be too much for the Rockets, and I think that Rocket strategy is going to backfire right in their face.
Should we talk about James Harden and Russell Westbrook? We haven't even mentioned them yet.
I did mention James Harden a little bit. I mean, they're an elite backcourt. There's no debate that this is probably the best backcourt in the NBA.
Much better than the Nuggets backcourt.
It's much better than the Nuggets backcourt, but I just don't think in clutch games James Harden and Russell Westbrook are going to be able to do it. I mean, they're going to need James Harden to ball out in every single game, which he's proven he can. Is that going to be enough to take down, a team that has much more bench depth, a better front court, a better well-rounded team? I don't think so.
Mason Plumlee, by the way, needs to get some more respect as one of the top 3 backup bigs in the league, maybe even top 2.
Mason Plumlee he's a great backup center. The Nuggets are really glad to have him on the team.
All right, yeah.
When you can take off Jokic and bring in someone who is at the skill level of Mason Plumlee, that's just a hard thing to deal with. And I mean, you have that compared to PJ Tucker and Tyson Chandler. That's rough. I think the Nuggets.
Do you think Tyson Chandler even sees playing time in this series? Do you think they put him out to guard Jokic?
I think they're gonna have to. I really think they're gonna.
Jokic is gonna toast him though.
That's my whole argument here on why I think the Nuggets are gonna win is because you put PJ Tucker on Jokic, he's just gonna muscle him up. He's bigger, he's stronger. You put Tyson Chandler on him, he's just old. It's rough. I just don't think that the the Rockets have enough interior defense to deal with Jokic. That's why I think it's going to be a shootout. Russ and Harden are going to be really hard to stop, but Jokic, Plumlee, Jeremy Grant, Paul Millsap, they're going to be even harder to stop.
It's weird to say this because I feel like the Nuggets for a long time had this reputation of being this like chucking team that just like did a bunch of shots, didn't rebound, didn't play defense. But now they're more of it almost feels like they're more of like a hard-nosed team. Like even when you watch Jokic play, who's not normally considered like a very good defender, right? But like you see him play defense and he's like angry playing defense. He's like going after boards and he's like really going after people and varying degrees of success, but I think that mindset is important and that's what you get from like the Paul Millsaps and the Jeremy Grants is that just like that yank down boards, just like play hard defense, like run the break, and I think that honestly the biggest thing is that we talk about players, we talk about strategies, but I think the Rockets is going to get out rebounded, and I think that the team that gets out rebounded is going to lose.
Yep. I 100% agree with that, and I think they're going to be board dominant, and like I said, their front court presence is I think just going to prove to be a little too much for the Rockets, and I just don't think this is a team they wanted to play in the first round.
No.
And
Can we talk how many? What did you say they won in how many games?
I think the Nuggets are taking it in 7. I think James is going to have his games where James and Russ are just going to have the games where both of them decide to drop like 30 or 40 points, and it's just going to be too much. But
can we talk about how many first round game 7s we've had so far?
A lot. Let's be honest. This is just a really, really interesting year for the playoffs, and I really hope they happen.
Oh God, I hope they happen. Okay.
I think this is a great time to move on to our last and final first round matchup, which is the 4-seeded Utah Jazz versus the 5th-seeded Oklahoma City Thunder.
Now, I think even more than the Raptors, nobody saw the OKC coming, right? Like,
I definitely agree with that. I don't think anyone expected them.
Maybe the homers. To be this good, maybe the homers were like, "We'll slide in at the 8 or the 7." Like, you guys don't understand how good we are. Like, no one thought they were going to be a 5 seed,
especially in the West.
Granted, 5, 6, and 7 seed are all tied at 40 games in the West. So take that with a bit of a grain of salt. They have better. They have better win share. Actually, the Thunder and the Rockets are both 40 and 24 with a win percentage of .625. I don't know how they differentiated who's the 5 and who's the 6 seed, but the Houston Rockets are pissed about it because they wanted the Jazz in the first round.
I 100% agree. I think, like I said, I think the Nuggets are just a bad matchup for the Rockets, and I think they were really just hoping for anyone else. Well,
especially the Jazz who they've beaten 2 years in a row.
Exactly. But, I don't know. I think this is going to be another really interesting series. Personally, I think Chris Paul is just a really good basketball player. And I think he's proven this moving to the Thunder and having them succeed is that, he doesn't have to be the guy on the team for them to win. He can just be that the distributor. He doesn't have to do all the scoring. He can set up Shea Gill. He can set up Steven Adams.
It's another example of how players just blossom in good coaching and buying into the system. And then they become great because of that, because their strengths are accentuated.
100%. And I think Chris Paul is going to continue to play for another 3-4 years, honestly. And, he's probably going to...
I mean, shit, he's got 3 or 4 years on his contract.
Well, he's just going to kind of move into that role of, like, I'm not really the star player anymore. We got Shea Gill emerging. Maybe he stays on the Thunder, of course. They got Gallinari on contract right now. But,
Steven Adams.
When he can just kind of hang back and be the facilitator, he's just such a good passer, ball handler. He makes smart decisions with the ball. He's a hard defender. He's just got a lot of really good, attributes. And, I mean, when he's not the focal point of the offense, or maybe not, their number one option for scoring all the time, I think that just really benefits him. And I really like the Oklahoma City Thunder in this series. I'm going to give
them in the series?
I'm going to give them the win in 7, not 6.
Wow.
7.
Wow. All right. I think this is our first big disagreement because I agree with all the things you said until the last 10-ish seconds. But I think the thing, well, actually, here's one more important. I know I just said I disagree with you and that I'm going to take the Jazz in this series, but I will say that it is a little concerning for the Jazz because I say the Houston Rockets beat the Jazz last 2 years. They really wanted that matchup. Who was on the Houston Rockets the last 2 years?
Exactly. Chris Paul.
Chris Paul was on the Rockets the last 2 years. So that's a little concerning. The Jazz really just got to get over that mental hurdle. But I think that I think there's 2 things that are going to push the Jazz over the Thunder, and their names are Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Because, one, Rudy Gobert matches up tremendously well against this team. They have Nerlens Noel, they have they have all these rolling, rim-running big guys who like to rebound. Gobert is like, oh, okay, that's my rebound now. That is an oversimplification of what basketball is. Because obviously Chris Paul can cook him if he wants to. But the moral of the story is those guys are both young. They were both all-stars this year. Their team is better than last year. I know people say oh, the Jazz are fake. They've been struggling. Mike Conley's a bum. But they got I don't want to mess up the name because all the Onoviches mess me up, but they got Bogdanovich, right?
Yes.
They have Bogdanovich, who has been a revelation for them on offense. And they have Mike Conley, who was playing his best basketball of the season right when it stopped. And I think the Jazz were, I don't want to say they were hitting their stride because they were 5-5 the last 10 games before the season got canceled. But they definitely had strides. They picked up from the Cavs. They traded Dante Exum for
Jordan
Clarkson, who was an incredibly good, a Lou Will-esque 6-man scorer coming off the bench and just really doing a lot of amazing things to the Jazz, finishing lots of games.
Honestly, Jordan Clarkson has really just revitalized his entire career this season.
I know. And I think he's doing it on a really good Jazz team that has the potential to go deep in this playoffs. I don't think it's likely, but I think the Jazz really have that potential because Donovan could. It's weird to say that Donovan could break out, but what I mean is that Donovan could really become that guy and really lead his team deep into the playoffs because he's so good and he has that potential. And until he does that, in my opinion, isn't really broken out as that guy. And I think Gobert is going to do Gobert things, except he's going to do them well in the playoffs, which has not always been the case.
I can see that.
Yeah, I just think their team is better top to bottom. I think the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's weird to say this because I like both of these teams, and I think both of these teams are good in, they're both really well-rounded teams, right? But I think the Jazz have the best player. I think the Jazz have a better coach, and I think the Jazz are deeper. I think the Jazz are taking it in 6.
Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I would like to say, as a fan of the big men, I am really just excited to watch Steven Adams and Rudy Gobert match up against each other. Honestly,
That's a very fun
I think that's
matchup.
going to be my favorite matchup in the first round because those players just have very similar like gameplay styles. They're both very defensive, hard-nosed, rebounders, and I just want to see them match up against each other. That's going to be fun to watch. I would not be surprised if one of them maybe got ejected.
Steven Adams,
It's going to be a hard-fought battle.
definitely going to be Gobert. Steven Adams has the patience of a statue.
However, I would like to mention one thing. In light of the drama recently between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, I know they've said that the drama's been squashed, but
That's the X factor.
that is the X factor, honestly. I don't know. And one thing that I think is going to be really interesting to see is if the Jazz do ultimately lose to the Thunder, is that going to spur Donovan Mitchell to request a trade? I could totally see that.
Here's the other thing.
If the team is failing,
I think this matchup is
he's
really
not happy.
really interesting to talk about because that would be really bad if they lost to the Thunder. Do you know why?
Why?
Because they beat the Thunder. Don't forget, 2 years ago, they beat the Russell Westbrook PG-led Thunder. Russell Westbrook got outplayed by Ricky Rubio, and Donovan Mitchell just shat on them offensively. Like, Paul George could not guard him. So they got Oklahoma's number. Granted, the team's very different since the last time they fought them. The Jazz are also very different. So I think it's just very interesting that you got Chris Paul coming from the team that
Took them down last year.
took them down the last 2 years, going on to the team that's been being beaten by the Jazz. I just think it's really interesting. I'm super happy we got this in the first round. I think it's going to be a really fun series.
I agree with that. It should be a great one to watch. And, I mean, just good matchups all around. I'd like to see what Gallo has to do in the playoffs. I mean, Gallo's a great scorer.
Gallo-
I just can't wait to see this series.
Gallo is the Y factor for the Thunder, and Joe Ingles is the Y factor for the Jazz.
Honestly, I can't wait to see what Chris Paul has left in the tank, too, in these playoffs.
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
I think Chris Paul getting worse is like everyone's like, oh, he's old, but he's like, he hasn't stopped being good yet. Like, you only say he's old when he's stopped being good. He literally has been an all-star the last 3 years, including this season. So it's like, let's slow our roll on the Chris Paul is bad train.
No, I don't think he will be bad for another few years.
Will he be healthy?
That is a good question. But I think the thing that'll keep him relevant and playing good basketball is his passing ability. Even if his athleticism diminishes because of injuries, even if he's not able to score like he has been in the past, just purely as a facilitator and a ball handler, he has a place in the NBA for the next few years, and I think he'll continue to thrive in that role no matter what team he's on. Granted, are they paying him too much on his contract? That's debatable. But
Is that the only one we disagreed on?
I think
We also disagreed on the Heat and the Pacers.
correct.
All right. So that's interesting. We only disagreed on the 4 and the 5 seeds.
Honestly, I think it'll be a really interesting playoffs if it
Yes.
happens.
All right.